Use the earlier version of yourself than the one you see.
It's true. It's true. So there's a halacha that's brought. Um, it's brought in a few places in Shas, but the version is brought over here in the seventh parak of Brachos in the Yerushalmi. It says the following: Rav Acha Amar Shlosha Devarim Nemr Bakos Shel Bracha. There's three halachic requirements that were established regarding a kos shel bracha. Anytime that we make a ritual bari pri hagafen, most commonly with kiddush, but really any kos shel bracha at a wedding or birkas hamazon or anything, right? Kos shel bracha requires three minimum uh, actions or rituals. Malay, it must be full, meaning you should fill the cup up all the way. Itur, which means literally to surround or to crown the cup. Okay. Now, to crown the cup, there's different ways about how this can be accomplished, but the primary way of which it's supposed to be is that you surround the cup, or you put in the immediate vicinity of the kos shel bracha more cups. This is where I believe came the custom of having the little cups that you hand out to everyone. It's not just the practical function that everyone should have some of the cup. That's a thing in and of itself, that people should taste from the kos shel bracha, that they should drink from the cup that the kiddush was made on. But the fact that there's these little cups that are at the spot, so to speak, of the person making the bracha that are then handed out, I'm positive that that's the original source of this blessing, of this practice. Umudach, and the final one is that it should be washed. That you should physically wash the cup before you use it. Okay.
But that is a real thing.
Yes. These are. No. These are not. This is very rudimentary. This is before we get into any. Washing the cup between each one. I don't know about between each one. Before you use it. Before the initial use,
Whether
for sure.
Clean or not.
What?
Whether clean or not.
Oh, so that's a good question. If you're saying, like, let's say you washed it out from last week and it's just been sitting in the cupboard and hasn't, it's perfectly clean. If it's for sure 100% clean, there's probably no, as we'll see in a moment, there's probably no reason to do an additional washing out. However, I would say that just like any cup, if it's sitting around and not doing anything, especially in this country, it can collect dust, it can collect whatever. But it's nice to just wash it out before you use it. I mean, even during the week, if you have a regular glass of water, you probably wash out the cup before you put anything into it.
We're probably diving too deeper, but what's the Indian of washing it out if it's not dirty?
If it's not, no, that's the point. It's the point. You should wash it out because it's physically washing it out. I mean, to make it physically clean.
Clean.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. 100%. Ushlosham b'pasuk echad. Now, this is the inside of the Yerushalmi. This only appears in the Yerushalmi. That the source of all these three is from one pasuk in the Torah. Which pasuk is that? Pasuk in Dvarim Lamed Gimel in Bezos HaBracha. Naphtali, the blessing for Naphtali. Naphtali seva ratzon. He is satiated with goodwill. Umalei birkas Hashem, and he is full of the blessings of God. That's the pasuk. How do we learn these three things from that pasuk? Seva, satiated. He is satiated with goodwill. Ze itur. This is alluding to the crowning, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Ratzon, that it is goodwill. Ze mudach. That is alluding to the fact that it should be washed out. What does that mean? Because if the thing that you're eating off is not washed and not clean, it's not pleasant to eat. It's not liratzon, like we talk about, like in karbonos. Liratzon al mizbechi. It should be pleasant, meaning the offering should be pleasant. If you give someone, it could be even a very nice, appetizing food. If it's put on a plate that's not clean, it's not liratzon. It's not nice. It's just not nice. So liratzon is this, that it should be washed out. Yeah, that the cup should be washed out first before using it. Malay kamashma'o, and when the pasuk says Malay birkas Hashem, it is full of the blessings of God. That is kamashma'o, simply understood. It should be full. Right? The cup should be full. Right. What
Not
is
overflowing?
Sorry?
Not necessarily overflowing.
So the overflowing is a different thing. That's based on another statement of Chazal, kol bayis shenishbach bo yayin kamayim. That is a sound. It is a sign of blessing. Any house, any household, that the wine spills over like water. That's the statement of Chazal. So based on this, people go out of their way to overflow it a little bit in order to fulfill this idea. What is that idea? Like what? No, it's not even referring to kosher bracha. It just says it's not even referring to kiddush, havdalah, anything. It just says in general, a house in which the wine overflows, pours like water. That is a sign of blessing for the house. So what does that mean at the most simple level? The Taz on Hilchos Shabbos says what I think is the definitive explanation. Maybe it's a little bit on the border of drasha, but it's certainly capturing the simple understanding. What does that mean? When water spills out of a cup, it's not a big deal. Like if you have a glass of water and it spills over, okay, maybe it's unpleasant, you have to mop it up, but like, okay, it's not a particularly big loss. However, if a glass of wine falls, that's already, a shame, like because you lost the wine. But a household that relates to the loss of a cup of wine in the same way that they relate to the loss of a cup of water, that is a sign of blessing, meaning they're not mourning over these losses, right? So, and again, it captures the general idea that water and wine they're related to in the same way, because even though wine is more expensive and more valuable than water, there's such abundance that it doesn't affect them as badly. So in order to fulfill this idea, they overflow it a little bit. But one could claim that this is perhaps bal tashchit, you're intentionally wasting some of the thing. People people have the little plate under the kiddush cup, and it catches it, and then afterwards they drink it. Okay, fine. I'm not saying either. I'm not saying either way. It's certainly not obligatory. And Malay, as I had this conversation a while ago with a Taimani Rav, he said, why is it that people assume that Malay means like up to the top, like up to the very brim? Like Malay could just mean Malay. Like whatever Malay is, that's Malay. And you say like, I want a whole cup of water. You don't mean I want it all the way that I'm like balancing it. Like no one thinks that. Malay means Malay, right? What? So okay, so I think that the simple understanding of Malay, meaning Malay like we use in general, like in our general parlance, Malay means the cup is full. Meaning, don't just pour the bare minimum amount of a revius. Make sure it's full, right? It's all right. It's full. Now, the fact that it's like slightly more than Malay is commensurate with the concept here that it should be full, because it should be full of blessing. Okay, so you fill it all the way to the top. It's expressing that idea for sure. Overflowing dafka, wasting a little bit of the wine doing that. Okay, that's a different conversation. I don't want to nitpick with people about their Shabbos table practices. What? Overflowing. Yeah. There you go. So this. Okay. So we'll get back to that, B'ezras Hashem. The section we're going into now is a new section on the Tagim. So the Sefer Reish Milin, it's not just the Aleph Beis, but it's also the different variations or halachic permutations, let's say, of the letters as they appear in formal writing. So we had, of course, the Otiot Sofiot, the final letters, and what the difference is between the final letter form and the regular letter form. And now we're going into another aspect of the ritualistic writing, which is the Tagim. Tag is the Aramaic word for the crown. That's what that means, the Tagim. So what's interesting is that in Chazal, these aspects of the letters are called by two names. In the Gemara in Menachos and Daf Chaf Tes, it's actually the same page, if I'm not mistaken. On the very same page, they refer to it in two different ways. First, they give an introductory story that we quoted last week with Rabbi Akiva, that Moshe, when he's being given instructions by God how to write the Sefer Torah, he sees God tying crowns, kosher ktarim. He's tying crowns to the letters. And Moshe asks, why are you tying crowns to the letters? He says, because there's going to be a sage later on in history that's going to be able to extract all this information from the crowns. And it calls them tagim. It actually calls them ksarim, right? The Hebrew word, kosher ktarim. And in a few lines later, it quotes Rava, the Talmudic sage in Bavel from many generations later, who says that Shiva Osios Srichim Shlosha Zionim, that there are 7 letters in the alphabet that they require each one of them requires 3 Zions. If you look at the crowns very carefully, they're literally like 3 miniature Zions. They look like little Zions. Yeah. So that's actually going to be important. The two names by how Chazal referred to them: crowns and miniature Zions. So the first section that we're going to do is Rav
Where
Kook's
did
intro.
Tagim-
What?
where did Tagim come from?
Tag is just the Aramaic word for crown.
It's not used in the Gemara. It's just not used there.
I do not think that the word tag appears in the Gemara. It's either keter, the Hebrew word, or Zion, the Aramaic, the word for the letter. All right, so the first section we're going to do is Rav Kook's introduction to the concept of the crowns, and then Zrat Hashem will do the first letter, which is Os Gimel. So Hamachshava bekocha hachiyuni, the dimension of thought in its vitality, in its vital force. Keshiyomedet b'chivyon ha'oz hanishmati, when it is still in the hidden recesses of the soul, meaning it's still in the domain of being hidden and not being outwardly expressed at all. Keshihi memuzeget adayin b'tahom hachayim ha'atzmayim, where it is still completely integrated. We've seen this word has come up a few times, memuzag, like when you prepare wine. So you pour a little bit of water into the wine in order to make the wine less strong. So the wine and the water, they fuse together. Memuzag. So it's fused together in the depths of life itself. In that sublime place, Sharshei HaKochot, which are the roots of all the individual forces, Harayonot, the concepts, Hatzivyonot, the forms, V'ha'idealim, the ideals, Hamitavim Sham, that are formed there, Sham b'makom chosen memshalta, Himit'alem al kol itzarut pratit. They transcend all of the specific forms. Shiyuchal kol ot katuv u'muvlat la'achil, that any particular letter is able to sustain. Shasham ein makom letikva shel hitzarfut shel otiot lahavrot. There's no tikva. There's no hope even. There's no hope of them being combined to a specific letter in order to give expression. And all the more so for the letters to be formed into enunciated words, lama'amarim, or to sentences, gzerot, hatzaot, the safruyot, into specified indicators. Let's say there's no way for that domain of pure thought to be expressed in any specified way. It's just a pure internal subjective experience. Hagvul hashameim milamata. Listen to the language that he used. This is just incredibly poetic. Hagvul hashameim milamata. The gvul, the constriction or the boundaries that shameim in the sense of desolation, the desolate boundaries of down below, asher nizrak bekoach takif, that have been thrown down with a forceful motion, mimarom, from their lofty origins, al ad imkei tachtiot, to the depths of the below domains. Harehu mevakesh et tafkid ha'arat chayav. So that gvul, that sense of constriction and boundary, it is seeking out the purpose of its existence. Hamachshava ha'elyona, the lofty sublime thought, ki efodat ha'chesed va'adunat harachamim. It is full of kindness and made adin. It is made gentle with complete mercy. Al kol hayesh, in its relation to all of existence. Al kol ha'asui, on all which has been made and formed. Al kol ma sheyesh lo yichul v'kivui l'ha'alot mitoch ha'machashakim, on all that yearns and hopes to transcend the darkness hagvulim, of constriction, the darkness of constriction, el ha'ora ha'elyona, to the sublime light, hamoshelet b'gaon hayosher, which rules over with its mighty straightness, hamitromemet mikol teor v'lachatz hagbali, which transcends any expression of the pressure, the lachatz of the gvul, the pressure of constraint, the pressures of boundary. Meaning it's like it wants to break free, as Rav Kook will say in a moment. It's this tendency of the domain of the letters where there is hagbala, where there's boundaries. They want to break free from those boundaries. B'haratzon nifgash. There are two distinct types of wills that meet each other. What are the two wills? Ratzon elyon ram begadol. There is a mighty and sublime will, maleh v'adir, that is full and mighty. Mechumash be'oz yicholet, which is armed with tremendous potential. Umutar betkifut tziur umifal, and it is crowned with tremendous strength and the ability to form and act. That's the first will, meaning it's this place of no limitation. It's the consciousness of complete boundaryless, no boundaries at all. That's one will. Veratzon kal. The other will is a soft will, katan umeduldal, which is small and poor. Hasharui betoch atzmiutam shel hanosim dakei hadakim, which dwells within the atzmiut. You could translate atzmiut as sense of self, or you could translate this as like otzem, like the might, the strength of hanosim dakei hadakim, of the small minutia, the small minutia. So those are the two wills. They're like the opposite sides of the spectrum. One is the will of might in the sense of no limitations at all. That's one will. And the other will is the will that is ensconced in the minutia. Dakei hadakim. Hamugbalim bigvulei meitzarim, which is constrained in the meitzarim, in the narrow straits. Vayit'orarut hachayim matchila le'ofia. The awakening of life begins to appear. Mitoch hamilui ha'elyon mitznotzetzim orot. From that fullness of life, again, that fullness of the limitless life force which lives in the inner dimension of the soul. So from that place, it begins to spark out little slivers of light. Umitocha agbala, from the constraint, hatachtiot mitbaltim niguim. And from the place of constraint, so there begins to be given expression small emanations of light, like noga. Shehimit romemim me'al shitchei hagvulim hamitoarim, that transcend, they begin to rise above the constraints that have been placed upon them. Okay, so what is he's alluding to over here? The fact that the crowns are above the letters. They're not part of the letters. Even halachically, it should be known that if the letters in a Sefer Torah do not have the crowns, they're not rendered invalid because of that. Meaning the letter is still the letter without the crown. So on the one hand, it's part of the letter. On the other hand, it's an additional appendage on the letter, which is already alluded to in that Agadata that we quoted before, that Moshe sees God kosher kisharim laotiot. He's tying crowns to the letters, meaning there's the letter and then there's the crowns of the letters. It's an additional thing. So he's saying that from the letters, i.e. the constrained version of life, from the letters, there it begins to rise up this yearning to reconnect to this place of no limitation. And that is the crowns. The crowns are emerging from the place of limitation and seeking to reconnect to the place of complete unlimitation, lack of limitation. They transcend above them. They turn towards the loftiest of loftiness. They are seeking out the complete freedom. And they wage their war. Milchemet haor, the war of light, mitgalim heim betor tagei haotiot mimalahem, and they appear in the forms of the crowns that are above the letters. What is this referring to? That they fight the wars of light? In what sense are they fighting the wars of light? Because the other name for the crowns are the Zionim, the little Zions. And as we've said multiple times, the Zion is the Klei Milchama. It's the instruments of war. So there's these two aspects going on in the crowns. One is the fact that it's a crown in the sense that it transcends the letter itself. It's the will of the constrained sense to transcend constraint. So that's the aspect of the crown, that it's above. And the fact that they're in the form of a Zion, they're a form of this like weapon and aggressive energy, is that there's a battle there. There's a battle. The battle is the ultimate battle, the battle to transcend a sense of constraint. That's the biggest battle.
Where are the destroyed boundaries that we were talking about before? That we were talking about before?
The destroyed boundaries?
The Shammai, right?
No, not the destroyed boundaries. He's saying that the boundaries are Shammai, meaning once the boundaries come into being, so they bring a sense of shimamon. They bring a sense of desolation.
And those are the boundaries of what? In the letters?
The letters are bounded. Yes, all the letters are bounded light.
And the light is trying to get out of that.
The light, exactly. They're trying to transcend the boundary back to that place of complete. And it's like It's this very powerful. It's like the constrained light experiences itself as desolation. It's like it seems like you're like a desert. Like there's nothing here. Yeah, so it's trying to get out of the desolation.
Right, it's trying to reach. So we are the letters, like the body. We are like the goof is the letters, and the soul is the crown, or is the soul the letter that's trapped in the form and it's trying to reach the crown, which the
So I wouldn't say the soul. We're probably going to get into this at some point, but this is the very idea of the nature of the soul. I think we've mentioned this at least once, that the nature of the soul, as it's understood, already the prophets begin to talk about this. You don't even need to go into the Kabbalistic literature. This is already in the Psukim. And the nature of the soul is that on the one hand, it's in the body. It's very much in the body, to the point that they point to parts of the body that are more connected to the nefesh, right? That the blood is the container of the nefesh. It says that explicitly, right? Ki badam nefesh yichaper. Right, I think I quoted that correctly. Basically, the soul is in the blood. It's like the blood is very much the container of the soul. So the soul is in the body in that sense. But at the same time, the soul transcends the body. Yeah, like the pasuk that we've quoted, I'm sure we've quoted this from Eov, "Bahalo neiro ale roshi," that the soul is akin to this candle of light, just like the candle, like you have a candle, and then from that comes the fire on top. So like the soul is like the candle on top, which is where the word halo comes from. I'm sure we quoted because I remember saying that thing about halo. Right, the whole thing about the halo, right, the light above the head. It's that, right, it's the soul that appears above the head. It's outside of the body. So the soul is both in the body and outside the body, and there are different names that are given to to give labels to these different aspects of the soul. The part that's in the body, the part that's out of the body, the part that transcends the individuation, the part that is more universal. That the person communes with their connection to the whole cosmos. That's right. It's a spectrum of soul. It's like your subjective soul, and then it becomes more and more connected to the universal thing. So it's not the body or the soul. It's the sense of constricted self versus the sense of complete freedom and complete lack of limitation.
You talking about all Tagim, or are there different kinds of Tagim that go through? Is this the whole subject of Tagim now?
Well, what other type of Tagim are there?
I'm sorry?
What other type of Tagim?
Not to say just like there are many letters. Are Tagim?
So as we're going to see, there are only 7 letters that have Tagim, perfectly, and there's only one type of Tagim, which is the three little mini Zions that form this like crown-like structure. That's the only type of Tagim. There are different customs that came about throughout the years that aren't mentioned in Chazal. That there are different customs about like different apertures that are given to different letters. The ches is a really good example. I'm sure you've seen the ches, how it's written in the Sefer Torah. The ches is not just like the three straight lines that we typically write a ches with. It's like these 2 Zion structures, and they're connected by this triangle like thing. Okay, so that's like different structures that have been added based on minhag. That's actually not a minhag. It's actually, to be fair, that's actually machlokas Rashi and Rabbi Tam about how you're supposed to write the ches. But be that as it may, I don't want to get too complicated. I'm just saying that halachically, from a purely halachic perspective, there's one type of Tagim, these 3 little Zions, and they're only on these 7 on these 7 letters.
Is it on Zion also?
It is. Zion is one of the letters. Zion is one of the letters that has Tagim. Shatnez gets, as we'll see in a moment. So Lochamim et milchamtam, they fight their wars. Romamot el begoronam v'cherev pifiot biadam. And pasuk in Tehillim that we say every day, right? That the praises of God are in their throats, and the double-edged swords are in their hands. Shiva osios tzarche tlasa ziyune. That's a quote from that Gemara in Menachos that we quoted before. There are 7 letters that require each one 3 Zions. Shatan is gets Beseder Alpha Besa, and in their order as they appear in the alphabet: Gimel Zion, Tet Nun, Ayin, Tzadi, and Shin. Yeah. So just to tie this in and to hash this out just a little bit more before we go into the Gimel. The idea of the infinite potential that has not yet been given any expression exists in tension with its need for manifestation in a constricted sense. The Midrash Rabbah on Parshas Miketz, so it quotes the pasuk that when Paro takes Yosef in to be his viceroy. So they call before him. They give him two names actually. They give one is right, which means the one mysteries, and then they call him by something else, Avrech. So the Midrash Rambam asks, what is Avrech? Huh? Vayikra lefanav Avrech. It says in the pasuk, Vayikra lefanav Avrech. So says the pasuk. What is it? So says the Midrash. What does that mean, Avrech? So says the Midrash, Av b'chachma v'rach b'shanim, that he was a father in wisdom, but he was young in years. A father in wisdom and young in years. What? Yeah.
That's not me.
Meaning Yosef has this dual element to him, that he's exceedingly wise, but he's also very young. Now that's not just saying that he happens to be very wise above his years. It's not saying it's saying that that there's dual qualities that are going on with Yosef. What are the dual qualities? Right? You see again, these all these midrashim, all these things, they're just comments. They're just a commentary on the psukim. They're nothing more than that. Like to think that they're not like pulling this out of a hat. They're just reading the psukim and expanding on the concepts that are there right in front of our face. When Yosef is called into Paro, what is he called into Paro for? Because he hears that this Hebrew has the ability to interpret dreams. That's why he's brought in. So they take him out of prison and they dress him up all nicely and they bring him in front of Paro. And Paro says, "Listen, I had this dream. It's really bothering me. Can you tell me what it means?" So he says, "Yeah, this means there's going to be a famine, and this is this version of the dream and that version of the dream, and they're double for this reason." It's like you give him the whole thing. And then once he's done interpreting the dream, he jumps into this whole 14-year plan. It's like, yeah, you're going to set up storehouses and you're going to keep the records like this. And you have to, this is the manpower, and this is how you're going to do it. So if you were Paro, what you would say at that moment, you would be like, who asked you? You're not here to tell me how to run the country. You're here to interpret the dream for me. Right? It's a fair question.
Big squeak.
Right.
Right. Out of jail. What's going on?
Right. And it's Dafka after Yosef finishes with his whole, it's not quite an elevator pitch. It's a bit more than an elevator pitch with this whole plan that he has. After that, Paro says, are we going to find another guy that has the spirit of God with him like this guy? No, we're for sure not going to. This is the guy. Yeah? Yosef, he is living in a world of dreams and simultaneously dealing with
I see what you're saying.
Dealing with the smallest little the storehouse has to be this big and it can hold that much wheat and it's going to last for this amount of months. He's dealing with very, very, very detailed things, or how Rav Kook would say, the dakei dakuyot, the minutia of life. He's dealing with that. Prophetic dreams and and logistics, right? Managerial logistics. What? It's a macro micro. But Yosef is living in these two domains simultaneously. He's living in right. So
but isn't that essentially what dreaming big is? It's I mean that's how we need to live. You want to you have an idea, you want to bring it, and the idea can be infinitely large, but you have to bring it into actuality. So it's going to be constrained. It's going to be.
So there are some people that excel with dreaming big. And there are some people that excel with logistics, and very often, perhaps more often than not, they're left with one side of the thing. They're left with one side of that, and they don't have So this idea of before any life is even formed, so the things are very much above the head. Right? It's like the Gemara in Nida describing how. It's describing the experience of the fetus in the womb of ner daluk al rosho, that there's a light above the head of the child, meaning it's the unspoken, undifferentiated Torah, which is just pure being. It's not broken down into anything particulated at all. It's just pure being, just pure infinite light of being. And then once the catastrophe of coming into this world in its full constraint is realized, so the child spends a lifetime now trying to reconnect to that light. Right? The Gra says an incredible thing. I believe this is in Tzafar Tzniusa, but I'm not 100% sure. I have to look that up. The Gra says on the Gemara in Shabbat, it says that when a person leaves the world, so there's 3 angels that come and greet the person. And he says, Achas limnos mitzvosav, one to come and count their mitzvos. one to count all of their sins, and the other one to see in this kaima Toraso biado, if his Torah has been maintained in his hands. So the question is, if you have all the mitzvahs tallied up and you have all the averos tallied up, what else is there? What is this third thing of whether of your Torah, if your Torah is maintained in your hand? So says the Quran, unbelievable thing, that third angel is the angel that taught you all the Torah in the womb. When it says that there's a malach that teaches the child the Torah in the womb, that's the malach. The malach comes back to the person. The Torah in his kaima biyada means, he says, the Torah that we learn in the womb, you were able to access it while you were in the world. The mitzvahs and averos, that's important. That's like the technical baseline for everyone. And right, there's one guy that tallies the mitzvahs, one guy tallies the averos. Okay, we have that done. The question is, were you able to reconnect to the Torah that you learned before you entered the world? Were you able to reconnect to that or pasha that was beyond, that transcended any articulated, compartmentalized message? Were you able to reconnect to that or pasha? Right, that right, or how, or huh? So what does that mean? So in light of this, we can understand, and we talked about this extensively in Os Aleph, right? This is really, in a way, going back to the beginning from themes that we talked about in Aleph. It's not quite the same, but it's very similar. That the idea of striking the child on the mouth and making him forget the whole Torah, as we quoted from the Maharal and Sefer Gvuras Hashem, what does that mean? It's not like some magical spell that, you know, and now I made you forget everything. It's not like, he's vexed and he forgets everything, like amnesia. And the very fact that the child is given, right, the strike on the mouth, the development of the faculties of speech is what makes the child forget, so to speak, the Torah that they learned. Meaning it's the ability to be in the world of constriction makes you forget the limitless domain from which you came from. So forget, not in the sense that you knew, right? I remembered the address of where that guy lives, and now I forgot. It's not like you had a fact in your head and then you don't have the fact in your head. It's that we're not relating to that thing anymore, right? Right? As Rav Kook says, once the person goes into the dakei dakuyot, I closed the book. Right? He puts the ratzon hamiduldal v'hakatan, the poor and small will, hasharoi betoch atzmiutam shalanusim dakei adakim. That he's ensconced within the minutia of life. So from that place of the minutia of life, you're not thinking about these big ideas and limitlessness and infinite potential. That's not where the person's consciousness is at. They're concerned about like how they're going to get to their appointment or how they're going to. Right? It's like the constriction doesn't allow for reconnecting to the limitlessness. But the Tagim, the crown, which is this warlike energy, is the battle to transcend from the state of limitation to be in the state of limitation, meaning it's still the letter, as we said, right? Like the Gimel is still the Gimel and the Test is still the Test, but it's fighting to get back and to reconnect to that limitlessness from which it came. And as Rav Kook calls it, this is tafkid chayav. This is like the purpose of its existence. So from the linear perspective that we've gone through all the aleph bays and we've talked about even all the the different forms of the letters. Yeah, the letters now know what their capabilities are. They know what their capacities are. They know their strengths, their weaknesses, what they bring to the table. Very good, but like they don't have a tafkid chayav. They don't like have a purpose to life. Like it's like, okay, I have all these skills, but like what is this? What do I do with all of this? Like, what's the meaning behind all this? So the tagim, the crowns, which are the zainin, the weapons, right? The weapons of war to transcend, they are able to get the person back to that sense of limitlessness, or Ein Sof, the limitless light that gives sense of purpose and meaning to every specific thing that they do.
Why only certain letters?
So that is literally the next thing I was going to say. So what are we saying? Just like what you said about the Otiot Sofiot, that the Mansepach, the idea of Mansepach is that there's a redeemed version of the letters. So what that means is that there are certain letters that the concept inherently entails a certain type of fall, or let's say lack or constrained consciousness that needs to be redeemed. So those Otiot, they have a fallen side, let's say, and a redeemed side. Those are the Otiot Mansepach. So if the concept of Tagim is that there is a constraint that needs to be risen back up to a sense of limitlessness, what that means is that there are certain letters that by their very nature, they're very, very constrained. There's a lot of constraint associated with those letters. And those letters are uniquely situated to fight back, to get back to a sense of limitlessness and transcending boundaries. And so every letter that we're going to do in the Tagim is going to explain why this particular letter is uniquely situated for this thing.
Does that mean the other letters don't have that ability to break free?
It's not that they don't have the ability. It's that these letters are uniquely capable. No,
But
that's not that they don't have the ability.
Capable, doesn't that mean by definition the other ones are not uniquely capable?
Correct. That's what. Yes, that's what that means.
So that means the other letters cannot break through.
It's not like we're saying that there are 22 people in the room and each one is a letter and only these guys have the ability. No, everyone has all the letters. Like we all have all the letters. That's the whole point of this book. Like within our soul are these letters, are these tsiurim, and each one is given different capacities. Different capacities. Let's put it this way: different capacities of the human consciousness are the tools to get back to a sense of to transcend the sense of boundaries of the world.
They're sitting at certain points and they're uniquely advantageous for.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So again, different attributes of the human being that every human being can develop. Certain attributes of the human being are uniquely capable of transcending the sense of limitation and getting back to this sense of ultimate freedom and limitlessness. The reason that we quoted this Yerushalmi in the beginning over here. This idea of the Kos Shel Bracha. The Kos Shel Bracha, again, forget not going into any of the mystical or anything like that. In the prophets themselves, the idea of the cup of blessing is the sense of limitlessness. Right? Kosi rivaya. Yeah, it's like my cup is overflowing. Yeah, Kosi rivaya. The kli, right? The kli machzik bracha. It's the vessel that holds the infinite blessing. The savah, right, the element of satiation, as the Gemara says, the element of svaratzon, of being satiated by the blessing, is acted out by surrounding that cup with other cups. What does that mean? Adding as many kalim as you possibly can, like surrounding that limitlessness with more and more vessels. That's the savah. That's the satiation. Right? You want a sense of satiation? You combine this attribute of limitlessness with as many vessels as possible. Wow. We know the story of Eliyahu. This is right. It's quoted in Sefer Malachim Beis, where he has this woman. She has a debtor. Right. The woman happened to be the widow of one of the students of the prophet, and she comes out to him and says, "Listen, I have all these debtors. They're coming after me. I don't have anything." So he says, "What do you have in there?" He says, "I have one thing of oil." He says, "Okay. Go out and get as many kalim as you possibly can. Go ahead and get as many vessels as you possibly can, and start pouring." And she's pouring and pouring and pouring, right? And her little son is helping her with the pouring. And this jug of oil it's like the Mary Poppins jug of oil. It just keeps on pouring and pouring and pouring. Yeah, right. Vayi b'chalos hakelim, and when the vessels ran out, vatomer el bana hagisha alai od keli, bring me another vessel. Vayomer Einod Kelly, and he said, "There's no more vessels." And then the oil stopped because there were no more vessels. Yeah? So to the extent that we bring more and more vessels, to that extent, the Ein Sof, the limitlessness, is able to be experienced. That's the paradox. The paradox is that the more kalim that there are, the more the limitlessness is able to be experienced. Yeah, it's not experiencing. The mistake that people often make is that, oh well, the kalim is the experience. I'm just hoarding as many kalim as possible, and because that's living in that state of constraint. The shamaim, the desolation of the domain of constraint. It's being able to gather in vessels, and the vessels are an access point to be able to experience the limitation. The Midrash Rabbah, just one more note before I forget, the Midrash Rabbah on that, in Vayikra Rabbah, says on that pasuk, Vata'amod Hashemen, and it says, why does it use that word Vata'amod, which literally means to stand up, right? That the oil stood up. Right? It means in context that it stopped, but what does that mean that it stood up? Right? Sha'ala yakrusa shel Hashemen bashuk, that the oil that went up in value.
So they made a lot of money.
Meaning what? Once there's no more vessels, what's the only way that you can make more money off of the oil? If the oil itself goes up in value. So again, what does that mean? in this whole mushal being played out in the context of the prophet, yeah, that all of the vessels are gathered in. That gives access to this place of limitlessness. Our kalim are not limitless. There's a finite amount of vessels that we can gather in. But once we've gathered in all of the kalim that could possibly be gathered in, then the sense of limitless just shoots off. It's not right. There's no end to it because the content itself goes up in value. Right? The shemen goes up in value. The shemen becomes more rich and more
Is that like Mashiach?
more valuable.
Is
Is that like Mashiach?
I'm saying, like, it's not. So
I think listen. I think when we talk about all these concepts, which are redemption, right? That it's the same. It's the same as what we are yearning for. V'yimaleh ha'aretz de'as Hashem, as Yeshayahu describes that experience. The experience of Mashiach is that the whole world is full with the knowledge of God. So the difference between what we're reading here. So the difference between what we're reading here and what the prophets talk about vis-a-vis the Messiah is that this is experienced in the hearts and minds of individuals. Mashiach is when this permeates the whole world. All of these ideas, all these concepts, all of this conscious. What?
These kalim are not others. They're kalim that are specifically for me. Kalim for me. So,
yes.
Oh, it's not.
That's the point that I'm making. The point is that everything that we're talking about now, all the concepts that we're talking about now, can be played out in different domains. It could be played out in the realm of the private individual. They can be played out at the level of a community, of a nation, and they will eventually be played out in the context of the whole world. The difference between the concept as we're reading it in the book and the concept of as it will be experienced at the time of Mashiach is that right now this is only being experienced by a few individuals here and there. Yeah. In Mashiach, these things permeate the world. Right? It's like Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, right? His Yahrzeit was a few months ago, right? The Pri Haaretz. He was one of the teachers of the Baal Tanya. He came to Eretz Yisrael with the Talmidei Abal Shem Tov. So there's a very famous story with him that he was sitting in his Beit Midrash in Tiberia, and someone comes in and says, "Listen, they say that Mashiach is here." So the Rabbi got up from his chair. He went outside and he smelled the air. He smelled the air. He said, "No, Mashiach isn't here yet." And he got back down and continued learning. Everyone asked, "Why did he need to get up and smell the air? Why did he just know?" What? Right. Why did he have to go outside? Why did he go outside? So he said, because here in this room, it's already here. It's already here. If I want to know if the big day has happened, I have to go outside and see if there's a difference in the air. So similarly, the concept we're talking about now, there's no fundamental difference between the concepts that Rav Kook is talking about and the das, the universal God consciousness of the world in the time of Mashiach. The difference is that one's universal and one is for the time being limited to wherever it appears.
Just so I can understand a little bit more clearly as far as on an individual.
You're not gonna be able to understand it more clearly. I barely understand what I'm saying at this point. Yeah.
So let's talk.
We can try. For
just a second, right? For just a second, let's wobble through it together. Yeah. So kalim that we're talking about overflowing into other kalim is. These are tools that I can utilize to become better.
Can I make a suggestion? Can I just make a suggestion?
Please.
I think it's really important when you're learning Rav Kook on letters, and you're not learning about the way the neshama is connected to the body and the way people are connected and communities are connected. To remember, he's only teaching about the letters, and it's just like to hold those distinctions. There are a lot of really cool, similar things that we can say, but he didn't say that. It's just to keep those delineations is.
I mean, but they have a place. They have a place where they converge.
I agree.
Right? They have a place where they do.
Everything converges ultimately.
Where what converges?
Where the letters and the muscles. How do we live our life with these understandings? They merge together. I mean, what's the point of learning all this if we don't?
Oh, that's what you meant by merging together. Yeah. I don't think it's a question of merging together. I think it's describing a mode of being or actions to take, practices to act out. Right. These are all describing practices. So anyway, let's try. We're already past the time a little bit. Let's try to do Gimel. Again, these letters now is going to be discussing how the attributes of these specific letters, these specific 7 letters, are uniquely capable of fighting this war of light, as Cook would put it, the war of light to escape the sense of constraint and reconnect to a state of limitlessness without losing the form of the letter itself, i.e. without having to leave the world of limitations. They still exist within the world of limitation, however, they have reconnected to the sense of limitlessness. So let's do Os Gimel. Hagmul Kulo. So if we remember all the way back to Os Gimel, what was the concept of Os Gimel? Os Gimel was the very beginnings of conscious subjective judgment. Os Gimel, right? Gemul is the idea of the just deserve. Meaning, if I do this, this should be the consequence. This should be. I should get this if I do that. He should get that if he does this. Right? Right. The first inklings of self judgment, and say self judgment. Excuse me. Of judgment that's coming from a subjective sense of self. They begin to emerge in the development called Gimel, in the stage of development called Gimel. So that's Gemul. It turns left and right at the same time. That was the idea of the Gimel being 3, because 3 is always connoting the idea of balance. You have one side, right, one extreme, and the other extreme, the right and the left, but then they're able to come together and be balanced out by a third element. El ha'emtza hu machria. It is given balance by the middle. Zoti tchunat hamilchama hatagit bichlal. And this idea of the Gimel, the measured response, the third element that's able to come and give balance to the two extremes, that is the main tchuna, the main attribute of the war that the Tagim wage. How is that? Lekala el hamatara hamamuzaga, to yearn for the goal that is memuzaga, integrated, mitoch otzmatan shel hanetiyot haramot hakitzoniot, integrated from the two extremes coming together. That is the main purpose of the war of the Tagim, meaning to escape the sense of constraint. The first tool that a person has in order to escape the sense of constraint is that two extremes aren't in conflict anymore. It's not an either or. That's constraint number one. Constraint number one is we have a sense in this world, it's like it's an either or. It's either this or that. It's black and white. So the Gimel is the power to have a balance between them and see, actually, it's not an either or. Those things can be integrated. Yeah. And when we talked about an Os Gimel, he's actually going to touch on this in a second. The idea of Os Gimel, it's a mistake to think when people talk about this concept, or also another place when this concept is really expressed, is the attribute of tiferet, of harmony or beauty. Right? You have chesed, the giving attribute on the one end, and gvura, the discipline, strength element on the other end, and then tiferet is like this middle element that stands between them. So people think, okay, there's this third element that kind of balances them out, but it's not a third element. It's not a third element. It's rather the element that is able to transcend the two extremes. There's a midrash that speaks this out, that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Then in the plague of Barad and the plague of hail that befell the Egyptians, so it says that fire and water were mixed into one thing. Right? You had the ice, right? It was hailstones, but they were on fire. So fire and ice, they participated. Right? The Midrash says a very nice language. Michael, who is the angel that is associated with water, and Gavriel is the angel associated with fire. So they made peace. They came together for that, right? For that plague. So you could think, you say, okay, well, it was a supernatural thing that usually these two things are at odds. And so temporarily they're no longer at odds, right? Like God pressed the pause button on the laws of physics for a minute so that these two things were no longer at odds. But that's not the point of what it's trying to say. It's not saying that the things are no longer at odds. What it's saying is that there's a third element that transcends both of them and therefore is able to contain both of them. And that's why we all admire people that are able to have dual aspects to their personality, or even more than two aspects to their personality, that would at first glance be contradictory. It's not because somehow this person was able to neutralize the conflict between those attributes. That's not why. But rather we see that this person has something within them that transcends the opposites. The person is able to be genteel and aggressive at the same time. He's able to be disciplined and giving at the same time. Why is that? Because he has now transcended the contrast and the conflict between those two things. And because he's transcended it, he's able to contain all of them at the same time.
There's allows him to, is the Tagim that boosts his ability to?
So this is the way to put it. This idea of the gemul of this harmonizing is the Tagim. It is that energy of war, the war in the sense of fighting the constraints of the world. So tool number one of fighting the constraints of the world is understanding that things that seem to be as polar opposites of each other, and that they're incompatible. No, really, they're not incompatible. Really, there is a possible integration. That's tool number one of transcending the gvul of the world.
Wasn't within the Gimel, that was with the Gimel, with the addition of the Tagim together.
So that's what it's symbolizing. What it's symbolizing is that you have the Gimel, which is this attribute of the harmonizing, and that's why Gimel has a tag, has a crown, because it's symbolizing that with this attribute, a person is able to wage war against the constraining and confining energies of the world.
And there's something to be achieved.
Correct. This is tool number one out of the 7 of waging war against the constraints of the world. So we'll finish off the text over here. V'tzarich hagimel hitgalmut hatochnit hamiviat hamishkal shel mida b'mida. The gimel it brings clarity and measure to the two sides of the scale. Shel shilum poel adam himatzei ora ish ka'orcho liot mu'utar b'machshavot v'kochot ziyuniot, to be crowned with thoughts and powers that are associated with the Zion. Tagiot and the crowns, me'olam elyon, from the lofty sublime world, me'amakom she'orach hayim me'utarim sham ba'ateret chufshem, the place where the life is crowned, the crown of their freedom. Meaning, with this attribute of the gimel, the person is able to fight against the constraints of the world, and get to the place where there's complete freedom. The efes hagbala, with no constraints, v'chehut tachtiot, and the darkness of the lower domains. The makom she'ein ikuv v'miniat yecholet, in a place where there is no ikuv is an impediment, right? U'miniat yecholet, ve'ein hamatzeret orim, and there's nothing that is constraining the lights. Umisham plagim shotfim lahamonei amonim shel seifim v'ifei seifim, and from that reconnecting to the place of complete freedom. From there is able to branch out infinite branches. Shekulam yonkim milishat hachayim, that all of them are drawing from the fat of life. Shel ometz haemet v'ayosher, the power of truth and straightness. V'yitgaloto migodel habilti gvuli, from its growing from the place of lack of limitation. Al hakikar hamugbal, going back to the foundations of constraint. Shel hakshavat ha'adam, of being attuned to the world, ha'olamim v'hagut rucham, and the natures of their spirits. So again, he's emphasizing, when he's sliding into home over here, he's emphasizing that the purpose of the Tagim, that they're fighting to get out of the constraints of the world, it's not to escape the constraints of the world, because you have to stay in the constraints of the world. You have to stay. There's no ultimate escape, right? But it's escape in the sense that you're now peering back to the source of infinitude, to the source of no limitations, which gives inspiration and a revivifying to be able to continue functioning in the place of constraint. So the gimel, we want the gimel to continue functioning as the gimel, to be able to lahakshiv la'olamot, to stay attuned to the world. That's the whole point of the gimel. The gimel, it stays attuned to the world and takes into consideration all the different disparities and all the different extremes, and is able to find the balance between them. So we want the gimel to stay within the world, to be attuned to the world. Light of this vivifying force, and from that it draws its inspiration, is able to continue with its work.
Is there any similarity at all between the keser that the Jewish people had and lost? We had those crowns and we lost them. Did that also give us the ability to function some higher